Cindy James was born in 1944 in Canada and worked as a nurse and counselor for children with emotional problems in Richmond, British Columbia. In 1981, after separating from her husband, a psychiatrist named Roy Makepeace, Cindy began receiving a series of strange phone calls. These calls were threatening and, on many occasions, silent, which caused her to worry about her safety. Over the next 7 years, Cindy reported a series of disturbing incidents to the police that seemed to escalate. According to her testimony, the threats were not limited to phone calls. Soon, Cindy began receiving unsettling letters, often with violent messages and magazine cutouts. Some events were particularly alarming. Her house was vandalized several times. Broken windows, broken lights, and destroyed objects. Messages written on the wall in animal blood were found. Her dog was found gagged and beaten. At times, she was physically attacked and tied up, but she always survived. Cindy reported being attacked on multiple occasions. In one of the most dramatic incidents, in January 1983, she was found in the backyard of her home, with her hands and feet bound, and a nylon stocking around her neck. She was injured and in shock. However, she could not remember details of the attack, nor describe the attacker. Authorities began to suspect that Cindy might be inflicting these attacks on herself, leading to a tense relationship between her and the police. During this period, Cindy moved several times, changed her phone number, and hired a private investigator, Ozzie Caban, to help uncover the stalker. Caban also found disturbing evidence, such as sinister phone calls and signs of someone lurking around Cindy's house, though he never personally saw the stalker. On one occasion, Caban found Cindy injured and nearly unconscious in her car, in a ditch near her home. She had marks on her body, suggesting she had been injected with a needle. However, once again, she did not remember clear details of the attack. As time went on, Cindy began showing signs of increasing stress and anxiety. Friends and family noticed her mental health was deteriorating, possibly due to the constant fear and paranoia in which she lived. Some began to suspect that the attacks might have been self-inflicted, and that Cindy could be suffering from a severe psychological disorder, such as multiple personality disorder or factitious disorder. However, Cindy always maintained that she was the victim of a stalker, though she couldn't identify the responsible person. She also suggested that multiple people might have been involved, though she never provided specific names or solid evidence. On May 25, 1989, Cindy was last seen in public when she went shopping, and later attended a meeting with her work team. That same night, her car was found abandoned in a parking lot at a mall in Richmond, British Columbia, near her home. Inside the car, there were disturbing signs. The shopping she had done was still in the car. Her wallet, credit cards, and other personal items were found. There were traces of blood inside the vehicle. Nearby, some of her personal belongings were scattered, like her jacket. However, there were no clear signs of a significant struggle, or that someone else was involved at the scene. On June 8, 1989, 2 weeks after her disappearance, Cindy's body was found in the backyard of an abandoned house, approximately 1.5 kilometers from where her car had been left. She was dressed in weather-appropriate clothing, and her appearance indicated she had been there for some time. Her body was found in a strange position. Her hands and feet were bound behind her back with a nylon stocking. A nylon stocking was also wrapped around her neck, similar to what had been used in previous attacks. At first glance, authorities considered the circumstances of her body strange, but there were no immediate signs of violence to suggest a recent struggle. The autopsy report revealed more complex details. She had been injected with a lethal dose of morphine and other sedative substances. Morphine, in particular, is a slow-acting drug, indicating that Cindy would have been alive for some time after the injection, before the drug took effect. A hypodermic needle was also found near her body, suggesting that the drug had been administered intravenously. The lack of signs of a struggle, physical aggression, or significant injuries on the body led investigators to propose the possibility that, if it was a murder, the killer might have controlled Cindy psychologically or through the use of drugs. One of the most puzzling details was the fact that her hands and feet were tied behind her back. Crime scene experts and investigators couldn't easily explain how she could have tied herself in that manner, if it had been a suicide. But there are documented cases of individuals who, under extreme conditions, have been able to tie themselves, leaving this possibility open. From the discovery of Cindy's body, several theories emerged about her death, each offering a different interpretation of the events. None could be conclusively proven. One of the main hypotheses was that Cindy, due to the emotional and psychological toll she had experienced for years, might have committed suicide. Supporters of this theory argue that the morphine injection and the discovery of the needle at the scene suggest she may have planned her death. Some specialists have pointed out that it's possible, though very complicated, for a person to tie their hands and feet. In this case, she may have used a technique to do so before becoming incapacitated by the effects of the morphine. This theory has weak points. Tying oneself so precisely and tightly, even under the effects of the drug, seems improbable. Additionally, her family and friends insisted that, despite her distress, Cindy did not have suicidal tendencies, and was determined to find her stalker. Another theory holds that Cindy was murdered by the same stalker who had been terrorizing her for years. Those who believe in this version claim that the previous attacks on Cindy, many of which left physical evidence, such as threatening letters and instances where she was found tied and injured, suggest someone was actively stalking her. The fact that she was tied and the lack of signs of a struggle could indicate that the attacker subdued her quickly or drugged her before tying her up. The constant threats, phone calls, and assaults Cindy had reported for years support the idea that it was not a suicide, but a planned murder. For many, the main suspect was Cindy's ex-husband, Roy Makepeace, a psychiatrist with whom she had been married for over a decade before separating in 1981. Cindy and Roy's separation was quite tense. Although there were no public accusations of violence or abuse, the relationship deteriorated significantly after the breakup. Some believe that Roy may have been unable to cope with the end of the relationship and decided to stalk her as a form of control or revenge. During the investigation, Roy claimed to have received a threatening phone call from an unknown man, saying he would kill Cindy. However, the police could not verify this claim, and some believed Roy might have fabricated the call to divert attention from himself. Since Roy was a doctor and psychiatrist, he had access to the drugs and knowledge necessary to inject the morphine and other substances that caused Cindy's death. This led to speculation that he could have been the perpetrator, but no direct evidence was found linking him to the murder. Despite these suspicions, Roy Makepeace always denied any involvement in Cindy's death or harassment. No charges were ever brought against him due to a lack of conclusive evidence. Despite years of investigation, the police could not identify anyone with a clear connection to Cindy's death, or who might have been behind the alleged stalking. A third theory suggested that Cindy may have suffered from a severe mental disorder, such as factitious disorder or multiple personality disorder, which led her to self-induce the suffering she experienced. This theory attempts to explain why many of the attacks were not witnessed by third parties, and why the police found no conclusive evidence of a stalker. The idea is that Cindy may have created the narrative of the stalker as a way of coping with her emotional problems, or as a result of a dissociative disorder. In this scenario, Cindy's death could have been accidental. That is, she may have planned another attack that went wrong and resulted in her death. There was no solid clinical evidence that Cindy suffered from such a severe psychological condition. Additionally, her friends, family, and private investigator, Ozzie Caban, firmly believed she was being stalked by a third party, not that she was self-harming. The coroner overseeing the investigation concluded that Cindy Jane's cause of death was undetermined. It could not be conclusively determined whether it was suicide, murder, or a case of self-harm gone wrong. Despite the intense investigation and media attention the case attracted, Cindy's death remains one of Canada's most baffling unsolved mysteries. This case still leaves unanswered questions. How could she have tied herself so tightly if it was a suicide? Who could have been behind the harassment if there really was a stalker? Was it all a psychological disorder, or was Cindy indeed a victim of someone else?